Hey everybody, Karen from Master Spirit Guides. How's it going today? So we have a lot to talk about. Definitely want to spend some time on the Truth Election Alliance, the Election Truth Alliance, whatever that. It's also Smart Elections and the Common Coalition, all of those groups that are working on the election integrity and really just, not just, but looking at the past, but also looking at the future. And the SGs actually gave me a message regarding that movement. And so I want to share with you some notes that I took when I was on their Zoom call. But in yesterday's video, I did post all of the information that I have for that. So I want to talk about that. And then Faye gave us sort of a timeline of when it's important to take action if you're going to participate in taking action on that. Okay, and we'll talk about that for a second. I do want to hit on the January 6th comment from yesterday. I got a lot of comments. You guys, I so appreciate that there were people who disagreed or were uncomfortable with what I said, but you guys were so respectful in how you said it that it opened the dialogue, I think. And so I just appreciate that. It's like I was in a weird mood yesterday and I don't think it came off the way I meant it. But that's okay because you guys just had a dialogue about it and people shared their feelings and their opinions very respectfully, and that's what this is about. This is a community. So we're not always going to agree on stuff or have the same perspective, but we can treat each other with kindness and love and respect, right? So I love that. I love that about this community. So I want to talk about January 6th real quick. And then I do have, the SGs gave me like 4 messages for this week. Okay. And we can kind of look at last week too. Just to kind of see what did they tell us last week? How did that work out for you? So we'll look at that too. And then we have an oracle message from the wisdom of the elders. Seems like a good one for right now. And then we'll read a little bit in the astrology for the month. I'm going to dip into that a little bit. Okay, so lots to talk about. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is, because it's really the most important, is the Truth Election Alliance. Is it the Election Truth Alliance? Sorry, the Truth Election Alliance. It's one or the other. Sorry. And then Smart Elections, and the Common Coalition actually is the group that hosted the Zoom call, okay, and that provided the information, the advocacy kit that they provided, which I will put in this video as well as I did yesterday's. Okay. There's a link to a spreadsheet that for every state, it tells you who you should contact and what it is that you should say to them. There's a link for that as well. Okay. You can send an email and it's mostly to the attorney generals is really I think the senators might be on there too, but actually, no, because I looked in Wisconsin and it was just the Attorney General's office. So this is really important. And I'm going to go over some of the notes. Now, I was like writing frantically, things that I thought were interesting. It's better if you listen to the whole thing yourself because you just never know the way that I piece this together. You just take everything with a grain of salt, obviously, and this is for entertainment purposes only and everything's allegedly. So, but anyway, what I wrote down is she basically talked about the 3 levels that that their organization feels that the Republican Party, or let's call them the Nationalist Party, is where they're headed. Okay. Especially with the big bogus bill or it's funny because, yesterday in the video, I called it big bogus bill. But everybody had all these names for it, big bogus bullshit bill or whatever. But I saw a video I didn't actually watch the video, but I saw the headline from Jasmine Crockett, her title, and it was from her channel. And she called it big bogus BS bill. And I thought, all right, I called it bogus bill too. So, anyways, so I'll post the video for the big bogus bill right here. Okay. just know that I do say something about January 6th in there that, I'm not a January 6th denier at all. And I don't think people were saying that. It's just that I was talking about different perspectives. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay. So anyway, she talked about it being, this is how they envision society in the future. And we know we're going to the 5D, but this is how the 3D envisions society in the future. They envision the wealthy, the workers to the wealthy, and then humane genocide, which is stripping Medicaid. Okay. So, humane genocide, just let people, just let them go, so without taking care of them, feed them a bunch of crap, which is basically, yeah, that's a whole thing I could get off on too. But, I don't want this to be, I have to admit, like, it's a good thing I didn't record like 3 hours ago. Well, first of all, I'm detoxing. There's no doubt I'm detoxing. I'm doing a little bit of I'm doing a program from, I've shown you guys the book. I don't have the book with me. What's it called? See, I'm detoxing. I can't recall stuff. But, what is the book called? Hang on a second. You guys are probably screaming the name of it out, but I'm reading the book Super Gut and following their 4-week program. And I just got kind of everything together. So I like the 3 or 4 days, I'm slowly introducing the supplements, because anytime I introduce something, it always messes with my brain a little bit. Like I get some anxiety if I do it too fast. I just feel off. And so I definitely can tell that I'm detoxing. So I must have stuff in my brain, cut, clear, cancel, because it happens quite often to me when I do this kind of stuff. So I'm doing it slow, but all of this kind of stuff, when I dive into, health, and anytime I take a deeper dive into some subject, and I've been doing that frequently. So the health industry, the food industry, the drug industry, because of this and kind of how I'm trying to just change the way that I feel, and the food, and again, the food industry. And I think because I've been doing such a deep dive plus this detoxing, the last couple days I have felt kind of F it, like just totally irritated with, and then like not knowing who to trust, and not, feeling like, the wealthy are just out to, and it's not all, but this is how I've been feeling. And, because, like right now, if you want to eat a carnivore diet, and I know it's hard for some people when I talk about this, because there are people who are eating a vegetarian diet for ethical purposes. Now, I eat meat, but I only eat meat that is ethically raised. So that alone may be a different conversation, okay? But the thing is, in order for you to eat meat that's ethically raised, like my husband and I just shared some bacon, probably a pound of bacon, and it was like $16. But it was like the best bacon I ever had. I have to tell you, it was the best bacon I've ever had. But in order to buy meat that is raised, like the animals are treated with respect, and they're not, you know what I mean? They're, pasture raised and all that kind of stuff. It costs a lot of money. And so who can afford that? The wealthy can afford that, right? And so it's like what they're talking about is that, the wealthy, the workers to the wealthy, well, they're going to keep, and that's like, I just feel like this is how I've been feeling. And I'll tell you where the spiritual part of it came in for me. So I've been feeling like everything's a conspiracy, not a conspiracy, like a true conspiracy. Like the food industry is just poisoning. They're just poisoning us. That's how I felt. Okay. And there is some truth to it. So it's really annoying. Okay. But then I always have to come back to, well, what do I have control over? Right. And not only that, if I learned anything from reading this book that we read in Let Your Spirit Guide Speak, if I learned anything in here, it was to ask your guides to heal you from your fear-based thoughts. Okay. So I went for a walk this morning and I was not in a mood, but I wasn't feeling joy, let's just say. Again, I'm detoxing for sure. I know that. But I just was like, I need to get some perspective, you know? But I did specifically ask them while I was walking. I'm like, because I realized that I was just full of fear-based thoughts, meaning like, I'm just like, everyone's a bunch of assholes, you know, they're just trying to poison everyone. They're just, you know what I mean? Like you can really go down this rabbit hole. And I do think because I'm detoxing, that doesn't help. Okay. So, anyways, I asked that and I'm not kidding you, like 100 yards later, a little tiny fawn jumped out on the trail. Well, her mom came first, his or her mom came first, and the little tiny fawn came bouncing afterwards with the spots on still. That's how small it was. So cute. And I immediately just went, thank you, you know, and and I've been sort of crawling out of it this afternoon. So it's very hard to educate yourself on different topics for me, it is. There are many people, like I listen to Dr. Berg, Berg, on YouTube. And he is a doctor and he knows that he knows what the drug industry is doing. He knows what the food industry is doing, but he's there to educate on the way that doctors are not able to educate us. Okay. And he does it in a very matter-of-fact way. But for me, when I learn things, I just get mad. Like, would you guys call it righteous anger? Righteous anger? Yeah, that's what happens to me. Like with a lot of this stuff. And so, but I'm wondering if I am an extroverted feeler and an empath. So extroverts will extrovert their feelings out loud, and an empath. So if you're a feeler and an empath, maybe you can relate to this. Thinkers and empaths can put it in perspective a little bit more quickly. I can, but boy, do I feel it. And the older I'm getting, well, especially now, I just, so anyways, okay. So sorry, little side note. Okay. They said, again, these are just my notes. Okay. If the election was stolen, that wouldn't leave us. They actually said all of these things, by the way, in the report. She verbally talked about this. Doesn't leave us with Vance, because this would be considered rebellion against the Constitution. All seats in Congress will be audited, she said. Our greatest strength is our diversity in the Democratic Party, but it's also our greatest weakness. So, meaning that we don't have like one common voice because we are so diverse. So we have a bunch of really good, but we have multiple voices, multiple groups of voices. But that is also our greatest weakness, okay, which I thought was interesting. Now, that's how I interpreted that. She did say that when this message is getting out there right now, she did say the movement is like 2 million strong, 2 million in terms of people being aware of this. And she did say that you will find trolls in the comments that says no one is doing anything about this. Like no one's doing anything about it. Oh, there's nothing they can do about it. Those would be trolls if you're seeing comments like that. So I thought that was interesting. The one thing I have to say the other thing I'm kind of struggling with is I have shared the information I shared with you guys, just the report, the Substack report, the report from the the Zoom call. I have shared that with a couple of my liberal friends, and I'm not getting any reactions. Like, I'm not getting any reactions, and I'm kind of pissed about it. I don't understand. I just don't understand. So that's another thing I'm kind of feeling right now. So I can do what I can do. That's all I can do, right? That's all we can do. Okay, she did say that Reagan was the most popular in voting history, Ronald Reagan, and he didn't take all the swing states. So that's interesting because Trump took all the swing states. Okay. They have a multi-pronged strategy. Oh no, they had a multi-pronged strategy. So the strategy was illegal access to voting equipment, which they have proven that they had illegal access to voting equipment. So it wasn't the voting equipment itself, it was the access to, okay? There were over 200 threats throughout the day that slowed down. I mean, why they never even took a serious look at that is beyond me. Well, they have now. Okay. And then the Leonard Leo connection, which was the video that we did a couple days ago, last week, on the election integrity. I'll post that video right here at the end of this video. Okay. The Leonard Leo connection with Eaton, Palantir, Tesla, Starlink, all that. Okay. She basically, and she said in the report that Kamala mopped the floor with him. If that is really what the data is, Kamala mopped the floor with him. Okay. So she even talked about why did they concede so quickly? See, this is why it's really interesting, because all the things that I've been thinking and all the things you've been thinking and we've been talking about and people have been making comments about was in this report, which was incredible because it's not like I sat down and talked to this woman about what I was thinking, you know? So all these things validated all the things that I've been seeing and all the things you've been seeing over the last couple months or since, last 6 months. So she did say that they suspect, and I don't know how they know this, but this is just from their research. She's a researcher, okay? So from their research, and she's a veteran, so she's like, you know what? I took an oath to the Constitution. And she's a person of color, and she did say, I'm going to get back to the Kamala thing. She did say women of color are tired of carrying water for a party. Excuse me, I got to get some water. I got to get some water myself. She said women of color are tired of carrying water for a party that continues to hand us a bucket full of holes. So, okay, so Kamala, yeah, so they suspect that they conceded so quickly because it would have been, my God, my throat is very dry. It would have been a civil war versus letting it be the people's movement. So they did not want to have a civil war. And you know what? I think they're right. I suspected that 4 days. I did a video 2 or 3 days after the election. And I was like, oh, I think this is why it had to happen this way. That was the video. I could find it and post it right here at the end. I'll have to try to find it. That they wanted to prevent a civil war. And I really think that probably would have happened. If the more likely would have happened. So that was interesting. So, and she even said, let MAGA see who he really is. So it's just really fascinating, everything that she talked about in this report. They do have a plan, by the way. And I got an email with a new Substack article, and they need donations. Now they're getting pretty close. They're only raising 100,000. So if we can contribute, they have like 88 at this time. But those are for legal fees because they're taking people to court. Okay. And so they need funding because they're not getting funding from billionaires, which, they should ask Oprah or something. Depending on what, Oprah showing up at Bezos. Anybody got any perspective on that? Showing up at Bezos' wedding is kind of interesting. Okay. So she said, how do we get this done? I just wrote, they know what to do. commoncoalition.com. It's currently a 2 million person movement. They need to get in front of all the attorney generals, which is what they're asking us to do. If they don't do something, if the attorney generals don't do something, now I don't understand this completely, but they attack their bonds, like their insurance. So that's interesting. So they have a huge plan on what they're going to do. Okay. So they need us to ask reps to review the alliance, the Election Truth Alliance. That's what it is. Election Truth Alliance. Okay. Okay. That is what I have. I just love she mopped the floor with them. So really interesting. Now, speaking of timing on this, okay, I need to go get some gum. I'll be right back. Okay. So speaking of timing, we need to, so Faye, thank you, Faye, for your email yesterday. So the astrologer that we've hired for the channel, thanks, Faye. She did get back to me because in a video last night when I did a clearing for you guys, I did an extra video for the public channel that we usually do in the Spirit Circle. And for the week, it was the weekly blessing. But I did say, because I think there was like a retrograde coming up, which it is sort of at the end of the month, but Faye took a look at the timing of in astrology in terms of what's a good window of time for us to be contacting the attorney generals in the states, okay? And Faye said, she said, from what I see this week, July 7th through the 13th, okay, so today's the 7th through the 13th is a good window to speak up, okay? Mercury's still direct, not far from going retrograde on the 17th, okay? And Mars in Virgo is perfect for this kind of action. Pluto retrograde in Aquarius is stirring the pot around tech, power, and systems that impact the collective. So this lines up to be a good time to ask for a review. So this week, okay? So by the time we go through Friday, if we wait till the 17th, or Sunday is the 13th, but you probably want to call Monday through Friday this week. So we don't want to go into next week because then we're starting to move into retrograde, okay? Once Mercury stations retrograde on the 17th, things could get a bit muddled, causing some delays or miscommunication. So this week feels like our clearest shot to get the message out. Of course, everyone should follow their own guidance and trust their own intuition, whatever the astrology says, okay? So Faye says she's decided to call her state's attorney general on the 7th and ask for an official review of the 2024 election results. It's time and the sky is saying go for it. But do it now. Next week will be too late. Okay? She said, honestly, I'd do it in the next 2 to 3 days. Mercury is in its pre-shadow. That's not a terrible thing just something to pay attention to, but it's best to do this sooner rather than later. So in the next couple days, okay? If we could all make phone calls, that'd be amazing. This is so important. And I think that's why I don't understand like a few of my friends' reactions to this. I'm just like, they're just not reacting, like nothing, no comments, nothing. Shared the report, no comments. Maybe they haven't read it yet. That's possible. But I don't know. Are people just giving up or what's the deal? I don't know. Okay. So speaking of SGs, our spirit guides, so using the pendulum, this message actually came last week and I had done a pendulum message for the day like I did for today. And I had decided to do something else. I think it was that election video. And so I didn't share this. But this has to do, I asked them about the work that this committee is doing, the coalition, okay? and they spelled out for me, they are accurate. They are accurate. Okay. Now remember, I did a whole video with the SGs, but it's really interesting that they did a pendulum message for us too. Okay. And then I said, how accurate? And they said 100%. Okay. And then I said, how will this is very interesting. I said, how will this play out for vote? How will this play out? You know, is their work going to go anywhere? Is kind of what I was wondering. And they said, voters will win. Voters will win. Okay. And then I said, which voters? And they said, all, which I think is so beautiful. That's where I'm at this point, you guys. I am so over the us and them. Well, it isn't us and them at this point. It is, like the coalition said, it's the wealthy versus the workers who are making people wealthy, you know? So, and it doesn't have to be us and them either, but it is no longer, we have got to, it just has to be the people's movement, okay? The people's movement. It's not red and blue anymore. It's the people's movement. Although I have to say, you know, there's always going to be a group of people, right? Now, I know there are some members of our community who are selling on Etsy, okay? So this is not, I mean, this is a hard comment to make because I want to support our members who are on Etsy. But there is a movement right now for people to boycott Etsy for the time being, because Etsy is allowing products that say alligator Alcaraz on it. Not Alcaraz. You know the tennis player Alcaraz? Alcatraz. I always get the two mixed up. And I'm not the only person who said that. I heard somebody else say that on YouTube. It's pretty funny. Yeah, there are a whole bunch of shops selling products that say that. And I just, when I saw that, I was like, what the hell? So Etsy needs to do something about that. I think that's just my personal opinion. I mean, is that just the rudest thing to be selling? It didn't even occur to me for a second. We have a shop where I could have, you know, that we put stuff on mugs. It didn't even occur to me for a second, not even a nanosecond to put that on a mug. It's just the most, I don't know. It's like, it is a concentration camp, people. What the hell, you know? See, these are all the things that I've been thinking about. I'm sure I'm not alone. I think you probably have been too, but okay. So I did say, will it be fixed by the midterms? Because obviously, you guys, if we don't take care of this problem now, it's never going to be fixed. You know, it's always just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you know, meaning they're going to be able to do what they did last time. If it is true that what this report is saying, if it turns out to be true, then if we don't take care of that now, it's just going to continue through midterms. So they did say, the SG said, yes, it will be fixed by midterms. So yes. Okay. Okay. So I think this video is getting a little long. And so we've gotten a message. I just think this is like the most important thing to talk about today. I do want to hit on the January 6th thing for a second. I think I will just come back tomorrow and do the messages, more of the messages for the week. But we did get messages from the SGs, okay, about this particular report. I just really feel like this should be our focus for today, and the astrology, and then you guys can stop listening to me and go make a phone call. Okay, so yeah, so the January 6th thing, I am absolutely not saying January 6th did not happen. It absolutely did. But the thing is, this is what reminded me too. I don't think it's unhealthy for us to question everything. I just don't think it's unhealthy for us to question everything. And that was been a part of my, over the last couple days, feeling of just like, I don't even know who to trust anymore. The more I find out about the deception and the, You know, it's almost like you do sometimes wish that you didn't know that life was just easier in denial, but of course it isn't, because then you can't make any changes. But, you know, sometimes denial is just easier for short term. But what I find really fascinating, so with January 6th, and I'm going to refer back to a little astrology before I end, is that there were different situations of things that were going on. The person I was listening to with a different perspective, and I just stumbled upon the video, I wasn't even looking for it, he was on the other side of the building, not where and there were no police on that side of the building, is what he said. He was filming it the whole time. Somebody had opened the doors from the inside, which is why, and then the crowd just kind of, because it was like a crowd swell, and they just kind of swelled into the building from that side. He said there were no police on that side. Everything was very calm. Nobody was like scaling or anything. And he actually ended up being arrested. So that I actually didn't even listen to the rest of the interview, but and so he was telling his story, but and kind of like what the purpose of them being there and all that kind of stuff, at least from their perspective, right? So all the comments that people left, you're right too. I mean, that's the thing, is we've gotten several cards from Spirit this year that say all perspectives. Everybody's got different perspectives on things. Now, what I do know is Trump was a major a-hole. Of course he was doing of course his motivation was to do, you know, what he was doing. I'm not denying that. I'll never, ever trust that guy. And so, you know, he sat in a room for 3 hours. That's been proven. Somebody had come in and told him that Mike Pence was being threatened. And he literally said, so there's proof in that, right? All I was saying the other day was that there are different ways to view things. And the legacy media showed us the same thing over and over and over again. Okay? What is irritating to me is we are not getting all sides of a story. And sometimes it takes too long to tell all sides of a story. So it's interesting to watch different videos from different people about a subject so that you can discern what might be true for you. Okay. But we don't even know that is. So that's all I was saying the other day. I wasn't denying that it happened. I wasn't denying, the Constitution says this is when it's going to happen, and it should have happened. It should have been a peaceful transfer of power, So anyways, that's all I was saying about the perspective. So, however, if you guys want to, if this is a topic of interest, because the January 6th stuff obviously happened before we were a channel doing this stuff, you guys want to do an SG session about January 6th? So if you do, go ahead and put your questions in the comments of this video, and we'll pull it together. Okay? Hopefully maybe this week or early next week we'll do it. Okay? Okay. What is very interesting, this is where I'll end this, is that in phase June or July astrology report, which again, I'm going to put a little bit more in the newsletter this week that goes out. If you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do so. The QR code's right there. So as I was preparing for the video today and thinking about my comment about January 6th, and talking to Marsha a little bit, because my sister even said to me when her and I had a conversation about it, because my dad, who, I don't know, some of you are new here, you wouldn't know that I've kind of, my biological dad and I are on a break. I've put him on timeout because I would say he's a MAGA, and he basically, he just talks just like that. I just can't handle it anymore. But it was more because him being right about that was more important than his relationship with me. So I kind of gave him the ultimatum. We either stop talking about this or, you know, and it just didn't pan out. So he's on timeout. But anyways, and it's been great, let me tell you. It's just great. So he said to me the last time I saw him, actually, which was like a year ago, he said, "Oh, it was a peaceful protest." And I was like, I'm just like, oh my God. Anyway, so I was having a conversation with my sister like after that. And then she said, well, how do you know it actually did happen? Which is a legit question because of AI nowadays. And I said to her, oh, give me a break. So I had the exactly same reaction that some of you had yesterday when I made that comment. In the comments, I was like, oh, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Did you not see it? You know what I mean? So, but her reaction right away was, how do you know with what you're seeing was actually true? You know? And so I'm thinking about this today, and as I'm preparing for the video, I'm reading through the report, so the astrology report for July. She says, in the US, this shows up in real time. So let me go back to what this is. Okay. So I'm just going to read this section of it. This is a little snippet about what's happening in July. Okay. So Saturn meets Neptune in Aries. Illusions collapse, truth emerges. Yay. Now that's in our personal lives and collectively. So I think that's cool. Illusions collapse and truth emerges. Together they tear down the curtain. So Saturn is structure, Neptune is illusion and our collective dreams, and Aries is fire, force, and identity. Okay? So those two, Saturn meets Neptune in Aries. Okay? Together they tear down the curtain, exposing leaders who perform virtue by pretending to care. Exposing leaders who perform virtue by pretending to care, but are only serving their desire for power and control. What we thought was solid now feels hollow. Okay, I think that's really how I've been feeling. That's really bizarre, Faye. That's how I think that I've really been feeling hollow. What I thought was solid, I'm feeling hollow. I think that's how I've been feeling over the last couple days. And I really do think some of it has to do with the detox, but okay, so now this has to do with that conversation I had with my sister. In the US, this shows up in real time as peaceful protests being framed as violence. You do know that the peaceful protests have been framed as violent on Fox News, correct? So if that's true, how do we know 100% that the peaceful protest on January 6th wasn't framed as violence? I'm just saying. I don't discard the fact that video looked like it was happening, and I think people have said it did, right? But they have framed our peaceful protests recently as violent. So people who are watching that would not agree that there have been peaceful protests in the US, which is not true, right? It is true that they have been peaceful for the most part, right? So I just thought that was very interesting that showed up in the astrology report as this kind of conversation. So it does make me wonder if this conversation needed to be had, just for all of us to be watching what we're just really more and more discerning. We've been talking about discernment for a couple of months, but really looking and just being more and more, just using more and more discernment. Yeah. And probably only before you react. That's really the key, because the reaction it doesn't make a difference what your reaction is, only because it hurts you and those around you. If your reaction is not based on truth, that's the problem. And so I'm trying really hard not to react to things. And if I'm gonna react, then I better frickin' know what the actual truth is, right? Ugh, that's the hard part. And again, that's where I've been feeling disgruntled over the last couple days. So, all right, this was a weird video. I don't know. I'm going to put it out just, hopefully it's helpful. Well, I really want, hopefully you guys will, anyone who's called to be making phone calls in the next 3 days. Okay. So I will put that information in the description below. Okay. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.